I was dead. But death was not the end. It was only the beginning of a truth I had never dared to imagine. As my soul left my body, I saw a brilliant light, and then I stood before Jesus Christ.
He did not speak immediately. He simply looked at me with deep eyes, filled with both love and solemnity. Then he showed me what was to come, a world-changing event that would happen on March 21st. Everything we know, every habit, every way of life will no longer be the same. I saw terrifying visions, lost souls, and a great awakening that no one could escape. Why is that day important? What will happen? And most importantly, what can we do now to prepare? I have returned from the dead to share this with you. Do you dare to face the truth? Comment below. I will reveal the message that Jesus has shown me. This is not just my story. It is a warning for all of us. I remember the exact moment my world went dark. Or rather, when it lit up in a way I never expected. It was March 2nd, 2025, just an ordinary evening in my kitchen. I was making garlic bread, waiting for it to turn golden in the oven, when suddenly everything inside me gave out. My legs buckled, my vision blurred, and before I could even process what was happening, I was gone. At least that's what they told me later. Clinically dead for 6 minutes and 45 seconds. But the thing is, I didn't feel dead. In fact, I felt more alive than ever. The first thing I noticed was that I was no longer inside my body. I was above it, watching the entire scene unfold like I was a spectator in my own life. There I was, sprawled across the cold kitchen floor, my arms twisted unnaturally, my face pale and still. The oven door was slightly open, and I could see the garlic bread inside, its edges turning black, smoke curling toward the ceiling. The smoke alarm would go off any second now, but I wasn't there to react. And yet, I wasn't afraid. There was no panic, no desperation to return. Instead, I felt the most overwhelming sense of peace I had ever known. It was as if I had been carrying a weight my entire life without realizing it. And now, it was simply gone. No regrets, no unfinished business. Just a deep, indescribable calm. Then, something shifted. I felt myself being lifted, drawn upward by an invisible force, higher and higher, away from the scene of my body, my home, my entire life. But I wasn't scared. The higher I went, the more I felt surrounded by something warm and luminous, a light so pure and embracing that it defied words. It wasn't just something I saw, it was something I felt, something I became a part of. As I ascended, embraced by the radiant light, a profound realization settled within me. This was no illusion, no fleeting dream. I had crossed a threshold beyond the physical, into a realm more real than anything I had ever known. The moment I found myself in that place, I knew I wasn't dreaming. It was too real, too vivid, too alive. I was no longer in my body, no longer bound by time or space as I had always known it. Instead, I stood, if you could call it standing, in a vast, endless expanse of light. But this wasn't just any light. It wasn't harsh or blinding, yet it shone with an intensity I had never seen before. It wasn't just something to be seen. It was something I could feel. It was alive, intelligent, and it knew me. Then I sensed him before I even saw him. A presence so powerful, so consuming that every fiber of my being responded. Love. That was the first thing that hit me. A love so deep, so absolute, that it stripped away every fear, every doubt, every piece of shame I had ever carried. And then authority. Undeniable, unshakable authority. I knew instantly, this was Jesus. He didn't need to introduce himself. His very existence was the answer to every question I'd ever had. He looked at me, and in that gaze, I understood that he had known me long before I was ever born. He had seen every moment of my life, every mistake, every triumph. And yet, there was no condemnation. Only truth only love. Then, without a single word spoken aloud, he showed me. A vision unfolded before me, more real than anything I had ever seen on Earth. It wasn't just images. I was there, living it. The world as we know it was shifting. I saw people crying out, some in desperation, others in revelation. I saw structures falling, systems collapsing, but also something else. Something new rising in its place. A great awakening, a moment of reckoning that would leave no one untouched. Then Jesus spoke, and though his voice was gentle, it carried the weight of eternity. March 21st, everything changes. As his words echoed in my soul, the vision deepened, pulling me into a reality beyond time and space. What I saw next was not just a glimpse of the future, it was a revelation of what was already unfolding, hidden beneath the surface of our world. The vision opened like a window into another reality. I saw the leaders of nations standing together, united in a way the world had never witnessed before. Flags from every country framed the scene, and in the center stood a single podium, illuminated by the eyes of the world. The most powerful voices on the planet spoke in measured, practiced tones, their words smooth, comforting, almost hypnotic. Churches, businesses, governments, one by one, they fell in line. At first, there was hesitation, but soon the voices of dissent faded beneath the overwhelming tide of acceptance. Pastors stood at their pulpits, urging their congregations to embrace the technology. God would want us to be safe, they reassured. This is simply wisdom, the natural progression of mankind. In the vision, I watched people step forward eagerly, rolling up their sleeves as the tiny implant was placed beneath their skin. It was quick, painless, hardly worth a second thought. Parents held their children close, relieved that they would never again be at risk of being lost or taken. Businessmen smiled as transactions became effortless, a wave of the hand replacing every card, every key, every identification document. It was the ultimate convenience, the final solution.
But then Jesus spoke. Look closer. And in an instant, the veil lifted. Beneath the celebration, beneath the promises of security and progress, I saw something else, something far more sinister. I watched as the implant did more than just store information. It changed people, not all at once, not obviously, but in subtle, insidious ways.
Those who accepted it began to lose something. Not their memories, not their thoughts, but a piece of themselves that was almost imperceptible. The light within them dimmed. The voice of conviction, the whisper of truth that once guided them, grew faint. I watched as people who had once stood firm in their beliefs became indifferent. Those who had once questioned, once sought truth, now accepted whatever they were told without hesitation. It was as if a part of their will had been surrendered, given away in exchange for security. And then I saw what happened to those who refused. At first, they were ignored, anomalies in a world moving forward. But soon their refusal became an inconvenience, a problem that needed solving. Why would anyone refuse? The leaders questioned, their voices calm but firm. This is for the good of all. Those who reject it are rejecting progress, rejecting unity. The world turned against them. Businesses closed their doors to them. Banks froze their accounts. Hospitals denied them care. The system was now too integrated, too essential. Without the implant, they couldn't work, couldn't buy, couldn't sell. Families were torn apart. Friends turned against one another. Parents watched in horror as their children, trusting in the promises of the new world, accepted the change without question. And then, the final stage. I saw a room, bright, sterile, filled with those who had resisted. They were given one last choice. Accept this, and you may return to your life. Refuse, and you will be left behind. Some stood firm, their faces pale but resolute. Others wavered, torn between their convictions and their survival. And then, one by one, I saw some step forward, their hands shaking as they extended their arms. The moment the implant was placed, something shifted. A shadow passed over their faces, their eyes losing the last flicker of something I couldn't quite name. And for those who still refused, the vision darkened. What I had witnessed was only the beginning. As the vision continued, I saw how the world slowly, almost imperceptibly, surrendered itself to this new reality. It didn't happen in an instant. It crept in like a shadow at dusk, unnoticed until the light had all but faded. I saw it happen slowly at first, so subtly that most didn't even notice. The implant was introduced as a miracle of modern science, a convenience that promised a seamless, more efficient way of life. At first, it was just another piece of technology, like a smartphone or a credit card. It stored your medical records, your identification, your bank account, everything you needed to function in the modern world, all in one tiny chip beneath your skin. People embraced it without hesitation. They marveled at how easy it made life. No more lost IDs, no more stolen credit cards, no more waiting in lines for paperwork. A simple scan of the wrist granted access to anything. Shopping, travel, healthcare. Churches, businesses, and governments praised it as a step toward a more secure and unified world. But something was wrong. At first, it was barely noticeable. A slight change in people's expressions, a shift in their tone. They still spoke the same words, still performed the same actions, but something was missing. The warmth in their eyes, the depth in their voices. It was as if they were less. It became more obvious over time. I watched as friends who once spoke passionately about their faith now recited prayers mechanically, their voices void of emotion. People still attended church, still sang worship songs, but the presence, the connection, was gone. It was as if they were going through the motions, following a routine they no longer understood. And then there were the thoughts. Those who had once wrestled with big questions, who had questioned and sought deeper understanding, now accepted everything they were told without hesitation. There was no struggle, no curiosity. Their minds, once filled with wonder, had become quiet. Too quiet. Conversations became dull, repetitive, lifeless. It wasn't just their faith that changed, it was their humanity. People no longer reacted the same way to joy or sorrow. I saw a mother at a funeral, staring blankly at her son's casket as if she knew she should cry but couldn't summon the emotion. I watched a man who had just received a promotion accept it with a nod. No excitement, no pride, just a vacant acknowledgement. The implant hadn't just made life easier. It had taken something. And then came the mandates. At first, it was optional, a choice. But soon the world moved forward without those who resisted. Schools required it for enrollment. Workplaces refused to hire anyone without it. Shops and banks turned people away if they couldn't scan in. It's just policy, they would say. We can't make exceptions. Those who refused were left behind. They lost their jobs, their homes, their ability to function in the world. Families were divided. Parents were forced to choose between feeding their children or standing firm in their convictions. The worst part? Many of them gave in, not out of belief, but out of exhaustion. I know something feels wrong, but what choice do I have? I heard someone say. God will understand, another whispered before rolling up their sleeve. What came next was even more chilling. Not through force or violence, but through quiet compliance. At first, the changes were subtle, almost unnoticeable. But as time passed, the world transformed into something unrecognizable. And those who resisted found themselves facing a reality they never could have imagined. I saw the world change right before my eyes. But what terrified me the most was that no one else seemed to notice. People welcomed the implant with open arms, praising it as the next step in human advancement. They lined up in clinics, rolled up their sleeves, and let it be placed beneath their skin without hesitation. It was marketed as progress, security, a step toward a better future. And yet, I could feel it. Something deeper, something sinister, something no one was talking about. At first, it seemed harmless. The implant made life effortless. No more lost IDs, no more cash or cards, no more need for passwords or paperwork. A simple scan and doors would open. Literal doors, but also doors to opportunity. Those who had the implant moved freely, accessing services, traveling with ease, working without restriction. Society functioned smoothly for them, almost too smoothly. But for those who refused, it was a different story. I saw it happen little by little. First, businesses began requiring the implant for transactions. Stores stopped accepting cash, claiming it was inefficient. Banks required it for access to accounts. Schools wouldn't allow unregistered students to enroll. Employers made it mandatory, calling it a necessary security measure. And then, survival itself became impossible without it. I remember the first time I saw someone turned away from a grocery store. A woman, her arms full of food for her family, stood at the register as the cashier stared at her blankly. "I'm sorry," the cashier said. "We only accept verified payments." The woman pleaded, offered cash, but it was no use. The people in line behind her grew impatient. Someone muttered, "She should just get the implant." She left empty-handed. The same happened at hospitals. People without the implant were denied medical care. They were considered unverified, a security risk. I saw a father turned away as he begged for his sick child to be treated. The nurse, though visibly uncomfortable, shook her head. "I'm sorry. We have strict policies." I watched as families fractured, friendships dissolved, entire communities splintered. Those who refused the implant became outcasts. They lost their jobs, their homes, their ability to participate in society. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," people would say. "Just take it. Everyone else has." That was the part that haunted me the most. How easily they gave in. It wasn't that they were forced, no guns, no threats, just a slow, steady suffocation. One restriction at a time until resistance became impossible. And in the midst of it all, the churches divided. Some welcomed the implant, calling it a gift from God, a tool for peace and unity. Pastors stood at their pulpits and reassured their congregations. "God doesn't care about technology," they said. "He cares about the heart. If this makes life better, why resist?" Others, however, saw the truth. "This is not just about convenience," they warned. "It's about control." They spoke of prophecy, of warnings from Scripture about a time when the world would be deceived into surrendering itself to something dark, something irreversible. They pleaded with their people, urged them to resist, but they were called radicals, conspirators, fearmongers, and soon even those churches were shut down. I saw once thriving congregations empty overnight, their doors locked, their leaders arrested or forced into hiding. The world moved on without them. The saddest part? Most people didn't even realize what they had lost. With the implant, something inside them shifted. I noticed it in their faces, their eyes, once bright, now dim. They went about their lives mechanically, efficiently, but there was no depth, no fire, no hunger for anything beyond the routine. They still prayed, but the prayers felt empty. They still spoke of God, but the words lacked conviction. It was as if something deep inside them had been muted, dulled. They had surrendered more than their freedom. They had surrendered their souls. And they didn't even know it. And then the shift was complete. What had started as a slow erosion of freedom became something far more sinister. The world no longer simply excluded those who resisted. It hunted them. At first, no one saw it for what it really was. The implant was introduced as a breakthrough, a tool for convenience, security, and progress. The world embraced it eagerly, barely questioning the consequences. Life became easier for those who accepted it. No more passwords, no lost IDs, no need for wallets or paperwork. Everything was seamless. But beneath the surface, something much darker was taking shape. I noticed it in the way people spoke, the way they carried themselves. They still looked the same, still worked, still laughed, but something had changed. Their words felt rehearsed, their emotions subdued. It was as if a layer of humanity had been stripped away. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then I saw it in their eyes. Something hollow, something missing. They didn't question anymore. They didn't wonder or doubt or wrestle with deep thoughts. They simply accepted. Whatever was decided, whatever the government announced, they went along without hesitation. No protests, no debates, just quiet, mechanical compliance. It was as if the implant had done more than connect them to the system. It had changed them. And then came the mandates. It started with employment. No one without an implant could work. It's just policy, they said. A security measure. Next, it was travel. Airports refused anyone who wasn't registered. Train stations, bus services, all required a scan for entry. Then healthcare. Hospitals wouldn't treat unverified patients. Pharmacies wouldn't fill prescriptions. Even private clinics turned people away. The message was clear. If you refused, you didn't belong. For Christians, the choice became impossible. Many stood firm, refusing to take the implant no matter the cost. We knew what it was. We had read the warnings, seen the signs. We had been called paranoid, conspirators, fanatics. And then, one by one, we were hunted. It started with quiet removals. People who disappeared overnight, their homes left empty. At first, no one spoke of it. The news ignored it, and those who noticed were too afraid to ask questions. Then came the arrests. It wasn't called persecution. It was called public safety enforcement. Churches that resisted were shut down, labeled as extremist organizations. Pastors were taken in for questioning, then never seen again. Christians who refused the implant were denied access to everything: food, shelter, communication. We were forced underground, meeting in secret, whispering prayers in the shadows. We moved at night, hid in abandoned buildings, helped each other survive however we could. Some broke under the pressure. God will understand, they reasoned, stepping forward to take the implant. But I saw what happened to them after. The light in their eyes faded. Their faith became mechanical. They still went through the motions, but something was missing. They had given something away. And then, there were those who refused to surrender. They were hunted. I saw it with my own eyes. Friends taken, families torn apart. They called us enemies of progress, threats to peace. They justified their actions with words that sounded reasonable, logical. We can't let dangerous ideologies spread. Non-compliance is a risk to society. They chose this path. And one by one, we were taken. I remember the moment they found me. I had been hiding in an old warehouse with a small group of believers. We barely spoke, relying on signals and hushed whispers to communicate. We rationed food, slept on cold floors, held on to hope with whatever strength we had left. Then, the alarm sounded. They broke in fast, drones overhead, armed officers storming through the entrance. We ran, scattering into the darkness, but there was nowhere left to go. I felt the cold steel of handcuffs around my wrists before I even realized I had been caught. They dragged me into a white room, bright, sterile, empty except for a single chair. "You've made this harder than it needs to be," the officer told me, his voice eerily calm. "Just take the implant, and this will all be over." I looked at him, at the empty stare behind his eyes, at the soulless compliance in his expression. I knew what my answer had to be. No. He sighed as if he had expected it. "Then you've made your choice." The door opened and 2 more officers stepped inside. I knew what was coming, but I also knew one thing for certain. They could take my freedom. They could take my comfort. They could even take my life. But they would never take my soul. I had braced myself for the worst, prepared to lose everything. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. Though the world rejected us, though we were hunted and cast aside, we were not alone. In the midst of suffering, miracles began to unfold. I never thought I would live in a world where faith would cost everything. But as the days passed, As the world fell deeper under the control of the system, those of us who refused the implant found ourselves living on the fringes, clinging to each other, to our faith, to whatever hope we had left. We were the outcasts, the unwanted, the ones who had chosen suffering over surrender. And yet, even in the midst of persecution, something incredible happened. We were not abandoned. The first miracle came when we had nothing left. I remember that night clearly. We had been hiding in an abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of the city. There were about 15 of us, men, women, even children, huddled together in the darkness, our stomachs empty, our bodies weak. We had gone days without food. No one dared venture into town anymore. Without the implant, we couldn't buy, sell, or even ask for help. That night, as the wind howled through the broken windows, we prayed. Not for comfort, not for an easy way out, but for strength, for provision. And then, just before dawn, we heard something outside. We thought it was the authorities that we had been discovered. But when we cautiously stepped out, we found baskets of food sitting at the edge of the property. Bread, fruit, even jugs of fresh water. More than enough for all of us. No footprints, no signs of who had left it. Just provision, appearing when we needed it most. It wasn't the last time. There were moments when we should have been caught. Moments when patrols came too close, when drones scanned the area, when we were certain the end had come. And yet, something always stopped them. I remember one night, hiding in an underground tunnel beneath an old church. We heard the soldiers above us, their boots heavy against the stone floor. They had scanners, motion detectors, technology that should have found us instantly, but they walked right past. It was as if we didn't exist. Later, one of the children in our group, just a small boy, no older than 7, told us he had seen something while we hid. There were big men with swords, he whispered, his eyes wide. They stood in front of the door. The soldiers didn't see them. Angels. I don't doubt it. I can't. Because time and time again, when we should have been caught, when we should have starved, when we should have fallen apart, we didn't. We were tired. We were hunted, but we were never alone. Our faith didn't weaken. It grew. We sang in whispers, worshipped in the dark, held on to scripture like it was life itself, because it was. The world saw us as broken, but I had never felt stronger. Yes, we suffered. Yes, we lost everything. But in that suffering, we gained something no system, no implant, no government could ever take away. We gained the undeniable proof that God was with us. And that was all we needed. And then, as if to ensure I understood the full weight of what was to come, the vision shifted once more. I stood before him again, before Jesus. And in his eyes, I saw both sorrow and urgency. The world had made its choice, but now his people would have to make theirs. I saw the truth with my own eyes. It wasn't force that enslaved the world. It was comfort. It was the promise of an easier life, of security, of a world without struggle. And that was the greatest deception of all. Jesus stood before me, his presence overwhelming yet filled with love. His voice carried a weight I could hardly bear, but every word burned into my soul. They will not see it for what it is, he said. It will come wrapped in promises, in progress, in peace. They will take it willingly, believing they are choosing freedom, but in reality, they are surrendering everything. I understood then. The implant, the new system, it wasn't forced upon the people. They welcomed it. They celebrated it. And in doing so, they became blind to what they were giving up. Free will, independent thought, even their connection to God. It all faded, piece by piece, until nothing was left but compliance. But there were those who would resist. My people will know, Jesus continued. They will see beyond the illusion. They will recognize the chains even when the world calls them freedom. And because they would see, they would suffer. I saw the hardships that would come. Those who refused the system would be cast out, unable to work, to buy food, to receive medical care. Families would be torn apart. Many would give in, unable to endure the weight of isolation. But then I saw something else. I saw hidden places, secret gatherings of believers. They had nothing according to the world's standards. No homes, no wealth, no place in society. And yet they had everything. I saw how Jesus provided for them, how food would appear when they had nothing left, how the enemy's eyes would pass over them as if they weren't even there. I saw protection, divine and undeniable. Angels standing at the doors of hidden refugees, shielding those inside from detection. I saw believers praying in silence, their spirits strong even as their bodies were weak. They had lost the world, but they had gained something far greater. Jesus turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "Tell them," he said. "Warn them. When the time comes, they must choose. And they must know that though the world rejects them, I never will." Then, just like that, the vision faded. When I opened my eyes, I knew I had been sent back for a reason. The moment I returned to my body, gasping for breath, I felt the weight of what I had seen pressing down on me. It wasn't just a vision. It was a warning. And now, I had to share it before it was too late. The world is standing on the edge of something massive. I saw it clearly. A deception is coming, one so subtle, so carefully wrapped in progress and security that most won't even question it. They will accept it gladly, believing they are choosing safety, convenience, and peace. But in reality, they will be walking willingly into chains. Jesus showed me the truth. His people, those who truly listen, who seek him above all else, will know. They will recognize the lie hidden beneath the promise. But that knowledge will come at a price. I saw the pressure they will face. It won't be a gun to the head. It won't come as an obvious threat. It will come through the ones they love, the ones who tell them, "Just do it. It's not a big deal. Why make your life harder?" It will come through hunger, isolation, rejection. And that's why I was sent back. To tell you, prepare now. Not by hoarding supplies, not by running away, but by strengthening your spirit. If your faith is built on comfort, it will crumble the moment that comfort is taken away. If you only trust God when life is easy, you won't stand when the world turns against you. Jesus' words echoed in my soul. My people will know the truth. That means you. If you are willing to listen, if you are willing to seek him now, before the pressure comes, he will prepare you. You will see clearly when others are blinded. You will hear his voice when the world is drowning in deception. But you must decide now. Don't wait until the moment comes. Don't wait until the world is demanding your loyalty, your silence, your compliance. By then, the weight will be unbearable for those who have not already decided where they stand. Jesus has not abandoned us. He will protect his own. I saw it. I saw believers hidden, provided for, untouched by the enemy. But I also saw that only those who were ready, those who truly knew him, could endure. So I am telling you, seek him now. Strengthen your spirit. Let go of the need for approval, for ease, for comfort. Because when the choice comes, and it will come, you must be ready to stand. I was sent back to warn you. Now, the choice is yours. Will you listen? Will you be ready? Even though what I saw seemed frightening, I share this, not to spread fear, but to bring hope. I did not return to tell you that everything is over, but to let you know that there is still time. We are not abandoned. Jesus did not only show me the dangers ahead, but also revealed the protection, provision, and victory of the faithful. I saw those who persevered until the end. Those who did not succumb to the deceptions of the world. They were not left in darkness. On the contrary, they were sheltered under the mighty wings of the Lord. I witnessed miracles in the midst of the storm. Food appearing when there was none. Doors opening when they seemed permanently shut, and people being miraculously led to safety. Those who hold fast to their faith will not be shaken, no matter how the world changes. Those who prepare now, building a strong relationship with God, will receive guidance in the most difficult times. This is not an empty promise, I have seen it. So, what must you do? You must stay awake. Pray as you have never prayed before. Seek the Lord every day. Read the Bible, listen to His Word, and let Him direct your path. Do not let your faith be just a routine or a tradition. Let it become your very life. Jesus made it clear, "My people will know the truth." If you belong to Him, you will not be deceived. You will see what is truly happening, even as the world is swept away by an illusion. You will have the strength to say, "No," even if it makes you a stranger among the crowd. And most importantly, you will not fight alone. No matter how the world changes, no matter how great the adversity, remember this: God is still in control. No power on earth can overshadow His light. The faithful will witness His glory revealed in ways the world cannot comprehend. I have seen God's protection. I have seen the victory of those who belong to Him. And I know that if you are willing to stand firm, you will never be forsaken. You did not come across this message by accident. God is calling you. This is not just a story. It is a warning, an opportunity for you to prepare before it is too late. The world is changing. The things I have seen are drawing closer each day. Today, everything may still seem normal, but in the blink of an eye, everything could be different. And when that happens, you must know where you stand. Are you ready? Do you truly know God? Or is your faith merely a habit? This is not the time for indifference or delay. Take action today. Comment below. Do you believe this time is near? Share your thoughts. I want to hear from you. I want to pray with you. Like this message if it resonates with you. It lets me know that you are listening, that you are ready to act. Share this with your friends and family. Many still do not know the truth. You could be the one to help them wake up before it is too late. Subscribe now. I will continue to share important messages that God has placed on my heart. You don't want to miss what's coming.
Jesus said, "My people will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." If your heart is stirring, if you feel the importance of this, do not ignore it. Let's build a community of those who are awake, those who will stand firm when the world crumbles. You are not alone. God is calling you, and He will guide those who seek Him. Act now. Comment, like, share, and subscribe. We need each other now more than ever. God bless you.